By midseason, Shedeur Sanders wasn't just a quarterback. He was a movement. In an era where players were often encouraged to focus on football and let the rest take care of itself, Shedeur stood as a counterpoint. Focus on football, but also actively redefining the game's off-field playbook. His presence in the league signaled more than just the rise of a talented rookie. It represented the breaking of a mold, one that had historically tied player marketability to draft position, team affiliation, and rigid league ownership of image rights. If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed. No more. The prime equity clause, crafted with the insight and foresight of his father Deion Sanders, ensured Shedeur entered the NFL with leverage few rookies, few players at all, had ever possessed. In practical terms, it meant Shedeur retained control over his name, image, and likeness, even as an active NFL athlete. But in broader terms, it meant he could operate as an autonomous brand parallel to the league, not subservient to it. This independence paid dividends almost immediately. The KFC deal, rumored to be an 8-figure agreement, wasn't just another fast food commercial. It was a cultural moment. The image of Shedeur working the drive-thru in a designer visor, flashing the peace sign, and handing out chicken buckets emblazoned with his number, turned into a viral campaign. Fans didn't just want his jersey. They wanted to be part of his story. And every company paying attention realized they weren't watching a campaign. They were watching a franchise form in real time. For the Cleveland Browns, this put them in an unusual position. Typically, a team controls the spotlight for their athletes. They curate media appearances, manage commercial opportunities, and negotiate licensing rights through centralized league deals. But with Shedeur, the order was reversed. The spotlight followed him. National attention on the Browns wasn't driven by their win record or defensive schemes. It was driven by Sanders' interviews, brand deals, and behind-the-scenes documentary clips that reached millions before Sunday kickoff. Inside the facility, it was an adjustment. Some veterans scoffed at the attention, used to a time when rookies earned their voice. But Shedeur wasn't disruptive. He wasn't flashy at practice. He didn't demand private locker space or special treatment. His leadership style was quiet, focused, and deliberate. What made him impossible to ignore was how unshakable he was. Even in moments when offensive captains barked in drills or media piled on after a close loss, Shedeur never cracked. His confidence wasn't performance. It was pedigree. By week 10, with Cleveland firmly in the playoff picture, owner Jimmy Haslam hosted a closed-door meeting with several senior executives and advisors. On the agenda, how to reshape the Browns' marketing, licensing, and media strategy around Shedeur's rising global influence. The numbers were staggering. Sanders' rookie jersey had outsold all others combined in the AFC North. Merchandise with his likeness, cleats, visors, even limited edition bobbleheads, were commanding resale prices higher than most veteran memorabilia. And perhaps most critically, young fans, kids under 15, weren't saying they were Browns fans. They were saying they were Shedeur Sanders fans. This distinction mattered. It meant Shedeur wasn't just building a career. He was building a following. And for a franchise that had struggled with national relevance for years, this was lightning in a bottle. Marketing departments scrambled to adjust. Local Cleveland businesses began reaching out for sponsorships, not for the team, but directly for Shedeur. The city, sensing an opportunity to revitalize its national image, coordinated community events that coincided with his off-field appearances. When Sanders visited a Cleveland public school for a youth mentorship session, the school's social media received more engagement in 1 hour than it had in the previous 6 months. The NFL league office, however, was less celebratory. Traditionalists within the league had long favored centralized control over player branding. The league owned the broadcast rights. The teams owned licensing. Players received percentages through union-negotiated deals, but individual control had always been limited, especially for rookies. But Shedeur, through the prime equity clause, had cracked that system. He didn't need team approval for endorsements. He didn't need the NFL's licensing arm to approve merchandising with his image. He had attorneys, brand managers, and creative directors reporting to him, not the team, and that quietly caused concern. League executives began discussing whether the clause could be challenged. Some teams worried that if Sanders succeeded too wildly off the field, it would inspire a wave of rookies demanding similar autonomy. Agents were already asking. College prospects were drafting nil-to-NFL transition contracts modeled on prime equity. And behind closed doors, some owners began pushing for policy amendments to streamline player representation under the NFL's commercial structure. But it was too late. The revolution had already started. In Los Angeles, a second-round wide receiver signed a YouTube content production deal before his rookie minicamp. In New York, a star college running back negotiated a blockchain-based collectibles platform featuring his likeness before ever taking an NFL snap. The walls between player and product were collapsing, and Shedeur Sanders was the sledgehammer. Back in Cleveland, Sanders remained focused. Despite the media frenzy and brand deals, he was still logging film hours late into the night. He still ran routes with backup receivers after practice. He still deflected praise in post-game interviews and redirected questions toward team performance. That balance, relentless professionalism paired with brand brilliance, was the key. His KFC campaign, for instance, wasn't just about chicken. It was about family. The ads leaned heavily into his relationship with his father, Deion, who also made appearances as a mentor figure, adding emotional depth. Fans weren't just being sold food. They were buying into a family legacy. Even on the field, his presence was redefining expectations. After a 3-touchdown performance against the Bengals, he met with reporters wearing a local Cleveland designer's hoodie. The next day, that small business sold out its entire online inventory. A week later, he highlighted a youth charity focused on inner-city literacy. Donations spiked by 400%. It wasn't just influence, it was economic gravity. By December, the term prime equity had become a buzzword in NFL circles. Sports marketing firms held panels on it. Financial advisors wrote white papers about its implications. Coaches, once resistant, began considering how to support players without stifling their growth. The old model draft, develop, brand under team control was being dismantled in real time. And Shedeur, knowingly or not, was laying the blueprint for a new one. The prime equity clause wasn't just about money. It was about respect. It was about giving players a seat at the table in decisions that affected their name, their legacy, and their worth. For the Browns, it meant learning how to coexist with a player who brought his own ecosystem. For the NFL, it meant navigating a future where stars could operate with, or without, the league's commercial infrastructure. And for Shedeur, it meant responsibility. It meant knowing that with every contract signed, every post shared, every product endorsed, he was setting precedent. By the end of his rookie season, Shedeur Sanders had accomplished something no fifth-round draft pick in modern NFL history had done. He was not only the face of the Cleveland Browns offense, but a nationwide icon, one whose name carried the weight of both performance and purpose. But Shedeur wasn't finished. With the Browns in playoff contention and his on-field performance solidifying him as a franchise quarterback, he turned his attention to a larger goal, establishing a generational blueprint for athlete entrepreneurship and economic autonomy. It began quietly during the team's bye week. While most rookies use the time to rest and recover, Shedeur hosted a private summit in Miami. The guest list? A curated group of young NFL players, college prospects, and a handful of retired athletes turned business moguls. The purpose wasn't to talk football. It was to talk legacy, ownership, structure, agency. In the opening address, Shedeur stood before them and asked a simple question. What do we own after the pads come off? The room fell silent. What followed over the next 2 days was unlike any athlete gathering in recent memory. Shedeur introduced a concept of vertical player integration, a strategy that encouraged athletes not just to endorse brands, but to build, co-own, and influence companies from the ground up. From media production houses to sports nutrition lines, apparel brands to educational platforms, the idea was clear. Athletes must stop being just talent and become stakeholders. This philosophy stemmed directly from his prime equity contract and his experiences negotiating independently. While most rookies waited for brand agents to land them deals, Shedeur had built a network of equity-first ventures. His KFC partnership wasn't a typical flat-fee endorsement. It included shared revenue from limited edition products, royalties from media content, and even a small stake in a pilot project for athlete-run franchise locations. This summit wasn't about flaunting success. It was about handing over the blueprint. Among those attending was a breakout wide receiver in his first season with the Seahawks. Another was a Heisman finalist expected to declare for the draft. And in the back row sat a veteran safety, nearing retirement, who admitted he'd never signed a contract without handing over his image rights. That weekend sparked something. Word spread across the league that Shedeur was organizing, not in the traditional union sense, but in mindset. Quietly, players began to review their contracts more closely. Agents reported clients requesting clauses about equity, licensing, and independent endorsements. Media companies received pitches from athletes asking to co-own content. The league hadn't seen this kind of awakening since the formation of free agency. Inside the NFL Players Association, a new term began circulating, the Shedeur model. Back in Cleveland, the front office walked a delicate line. On one hand, Sanders was winning games, electrifying fans, and driving record revenue. On the other, his influence was outpacing the organization's control. He declined to participate in certain NFL-mandated promotions, citing his independent brand obligations. He wore custom cleats designed by local Cleveland artists, bypassing official league suppliers. And while his teammates respected him deeply, a quiet divide began to form between those operating the traditional system and those adapting to the new one. Some within the league office bristled. "Who does this kid think he is?" One executive reportedly said. "He hasn't even won a playoff game." But Shedeur didn't need to respond. He let his actions speak. He launched a media studio, PR1Me Originals, aimed at telling stories from the athlete's perspective. The first documentary, Layers, explored the mental health challenges faced by black quarterbacks in predominantly white leadership environments. It was raw, honest, and immediately resonated with fans. Within a week, ESPN and Amazon Prime were in bidding wars for exclusive streaming rights. Next came Legacy Saturdays, a community initiative where Shedeur visited one small black-owned business in Cleveland each week, highlighted them on his social media, and donated a percentage of his jersey sales that weekend to their growth. The impact was immediate. Businesses that once struggled to keep lights on were now expanding, hiring, and serving as community anchors. These efforts weren't part of a brand strategy. They were personal. "I watched my dad be more than just a player," Shedeur said in a local interview. "He showed me how to use your name to lift others. If I got a spotlight, I'm going to shine it." Meanwhile, the Browns prepared for their first home playoff game in over a decade. The stadium was sold out. Half the fans wore Shedeur jerseys. National broadcasters focused their pre-game shows not just on XS and OS, but on the quarterback who'd redefined rookie expectations and injected cultural relevance into a franchise long dismissed as forgettable. On the field, Shedeur was surgical. He didn't need to throw for 400 yards to control the game. His reads were sharp. His footwork, honed through relentless off-season training, gave him time. And when the pocket collapsed, he moved with the same calm grace his father once used to cover receivers downfield. By the fourth quarter, the Browns led by 10. Cameras caught Shedeur, kneeling on the sideline, hands clasped, not in prayer, but in focus. This wasn't about winning one game. It was about building a movement. After the win, reporters swarmed. "How does it feel to prove everyone wrong?" one asked. Shedeur smiled. "I wasn't trying to prove anyone wrong," he said. "I'm just proving what's possible." The soundbite went viral. Again, in the weeks that followed, Shedeur's presence continued to reshape the NFL's cultural dynamics. At the Rookie Symposium, he was asked to keynote, a rare honor for an active player. He spoke not about touchdowns, but about trademarks, taxes, and transfer of value, about controlling your name, about being more than a moment. By off-season, PR1Me Originals had 4 content projects in development. Sanders Media Company signed a nil mentorship deal with a major college conference. And Shedeur himself quietly invested in a startup focus on financial literacy for young athletes. Still, not all responses were positive. Certain league officials pushed for more centralized image rights control, fearing a wave of Shedeur-style contracts could undermine the NFL's licensing model. A few team executives lobbied for new clauses in rookie deals that would limit off-field commercial independence. Even some traditional broadcasters expressed concern that athletes controlling their own stories would disrupt journalistic objectivity. But Shedeur wasn't fighting them. He was just showing there was another way, and players were watching. By the start of the next season, a second-year running back entered contract negotiations demanding Shedeur-style terms. A top college quarterback tweeted that he wouldn't sign with any team that didn't support independent brand development. And the NFLPA began considering amendments to its standard player contract templates to reflect a post-Sanders era. In the eyes of many, Shedeur had transcended his position. He was now a cultural architect. By the spring of the following year, something was brewing in the heart of the NFL that hadn't been seen in decades. It started as murmurs in locker rooms. Across the league, veterans and rookies alike were talking about equity clauses, media ownership, and personal licensing rights. A second-year cornerback from the Jaguars asked his agent to renegotiate his marketing rights. A star receiver in Buffalo declined a league-mandated photo shoot, citing conflict with my private licensing agreements. And most notably, the NFLPA, long considered sluggish and cautious, found itself flooded with requests from players seeking new templates for contract language. At the center of this quiet revolution was Shedeur Sanders. After an extraordinary rookie season in which he led the Cleveland Browns to the AFC Championship game, Sanders had become more than a quarterback. He had become a lightning rod, an embodiment of the future of athlete autonomy. Following the season, he took a short vacation to clear his head. But even in the Bahamas, business followed him. Phone calls poured in from other players, agents, and media figures. Everyone wanted to know how he did it. Not just the wins, not just the marketing deals, but the control. The answer for Shedeur was simple. He never gave it away in the first place. Thanks to his father, Deion, and the prime equity clause embedded in his rookie contract, Shedeur retained full control over his name, likeness, and endorsement pathway. While the NFL and its commercial partners typically lock rookies into group licensing agreements, Shedeur's contract created a carve-out. It allowed him to independently negotiate everything, from jersey royalties to digital media rights, without being pulled into the NFL's umbrella marketing structure. And now, others wanted that freedom. So Shedeur moved again, but this time not on the field. He returned to Cleveland and hosted a private meeting at a downtown hotel, inviting 20 of the most influential players in the league. Quarterbacks, defensive captains, union reps, and 2 former Super Bowl MVPs. The goal was clear: prepare a coalition for the upcoming collective bargaining cycle. The room was electric. Players spoke of being treated like disposable assets, of watching team owners get richer, while athletes retire with broken bodies and minimal say in their careers. One veteran linebacker told a story of being fined for appearing in a commercial he didn't realize violated NFL licensing rules. Another player recounted how a team used his social media likeness in an ad campaign without any compensation. Then Shedeur stood and presented a slide deck. It wasn't flashy. It was simple. For words on the first slide, "You are the product." A hush swept over the room. What followed was a masterclass in economics and vision. Shedeur laid out a proposal for a new chapter in the NFLPA's evolution, one where players demanded a personal image rights clause, full content licensing control, and a voice in revenue sharing tied directly to league media assets. He wasn't calling for a strike. Not yet. He was calling for education. And so the campaign began, #OwnYourName. Over the offseason, players across the league posted videos with that hashtag, talking about their stories, their dreams, and their rights. Shedeur backed it with resources from PR One Me Originals, producing short films highlighting the often invisible value players contribute to the league's global brand. These were distributed not just on Instagram and YouTube, but through encrypted players-only channels where internal education could continue without league interference. Team owners began to notice. Suddenly, young rookies in contract negotiations were demanding Shedeur clauses. Veteran players were adding private media clauses into their deals. And when one owner balked at a marketing rights request, that player walked, willing to sit out a season to preserve his autonomy. Meanwhile, in Cleveland, Shedeur continued to lead by example. He entered his second NFL season more focused than ever. His offseason was split between rigorous two-a-day workouts and weekly Zoom calls with legal teams and player reps helping craft contract templates for independent athlete licensing. On the field, he was spectacular, more confident, more polished, and more dangerous under pressure. The Browns were now being spoken of as not just contenders, but as a team that built a dynasty around innovation, culture, and leadership. But with attention came resistance. The NFL's league office quietly lobbied media partners to minimize coverage of the hashtag #OwnYourName campaign. Certain teams began discouraging players from associating with PR One Me originals, citing conflict of interest. A leaked memo showed the NFL discussing ways to regain control of image group licensing pathways to protect league revenue. Still, Shedeur was unshaken. He met with union leaders and encouraged them to remain calm, to be strategic. He reminded them that real power didn't lie in confrontation, but in leverage. And leverage, they had. The upcoming TV rights negotiations were the biggest in NFL history. Billions of dollars hung in the balance. And for the first time, the players realized that the league needed them more than ever. Not just their play, but their faces, their stories, their brands. So Shedeur made a move that stunned everyone. He declined to appear in the NFL's preseason media campaign. And as Shedeur walked off the field in the final regular season game, amid a roar of cheers from fans holding signs reading, "Our QB, our voice," he stopped, took a moment, and looked at the camera. "We don't just play the game," he said. "We shape it."